Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Hannah Elliott, and this is Hot Pursuit.
All right, we are tariff today, right?
On repeat.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, not sorry. We're talking about tariffs.
Well, you have to talk about them because it's going to change everything. I mean, it's completely reorganizing a century-old system of global trade. So,
I know.
And cars are such a big part of that.
This is like the entry of a bullet, where the entry point is smaller, and then the destruction or the chaos is as the bullet moves through. And I'm not a ballistics expert, but I think the ramifications of this are going to be massive. Obviously, you're smiling. Are you laughing at my comparison here?
No, I love it. First of all, I do love your comparison. I love ballistics. But yeah,
I think the fallout's going to be increasingly massive.
Well, we've already seen like crazy fallout. My day job is covering the markets over the opening bell every day from 9 to 11 on Bloomberg Television or Bloomberg.com. And, we focus in on single stock stories and on industries. And I'm always kind of fighting with people who want to cover banks and people who want to cover retail and people who want to cover energy and people who want to cover industrials, but I care about cars. And the fun thing for me about this tariff chaos, beyond the fact that, chaos makes things more interesting, is everybody wants to talk about automakers. Like all of my producers yes, now's the time to focus on cars because they're such a huge part of this story.
Yeah, I know. It's this I've actually always known. I will cop to that because cars influence everything. And, most people don't think about cars on a day-to-day, daily basis, but they are so woven into the fabric of our culture. Once you start messing with the car world, it's going to have a very wide effects. So I, in a weird way, love to hear that all of your people on your side want to talk cars.
Well, and we have the perfect guest to talk about it today, Erin Keating from Cox Automotive, which has done such an incredible job researching and putting out intel on the business side of the industry. Plus, she's a car lover herself. She goes and test drives new cars and has opinions on them just like you and I do. And they own Manheim, which does the auctions, the wholesale auctions for dealerships.
Yeah, she's one of my favorite people to talk to. And it's funny, she had a scheduled vacation this week. So talk about timing for her. I don't think she got much vacation, but I'm so glad she could join us.
All right, let's get straight into it. This is Erin Keating from Cox Automotive. I just have a couple personally specific questions. I've seen Cox doing great coverage on a number of different issues. One of them is affordable cars. Like it seems as if these tariffs, especially if the so-called reciprocal tariffs go back into place in 90 days, there won't be any affordable cars for Americans to buy in this market.
So, what I want to just emphasize here, and we were just talking about this as a team this morning, the costs that we're seeing that are coming in are costs and costs only. So when we're looking at a tariff, we're saying the automaker or the importer of record, which is typically the automaker, is going to get hit with this 27.5% tariff. How that shows up for the customer, completely different story. And honestly, I'm not sure how quickly automakers are going to jump in to jack up the prices on individual models. In fact, I would bet almost all of them will look across their entire portfolio and the vehicles that you guys are a lot of the times focused on luxury are going to get the bump because profitability is there to be able to absorb some of that tariff so that they can keep competitive at the entry level models and or just the vehicles that are available for lower price. So just because a $30,000 vehicle is going to get hit with 25%, say like a Chevy Trax, which we know is completely brought in from Korea, I can't imagine, at least in my head, how Chevy says, oh, let's make that $30,000 car bear the hit of that 27.5%, right? Or 25%. I think they don't have the original MFN. But so I think that's what everyone kind of has to keep in mind, is that the automaker has a lot of different levers to pull to figure out how does this ultimately impact the consumer. Prices will rise naturally, demand and supply, and the pull ahead buying that we have right now, and the fact that inventory might get impacted because OEMs might pull back on producing as much until they can figure out how they're going to deal with the economic challenge of this. But it's not apples to apples tariff price increase.
All right, interesting.
And that would be dependent on the automaker too. Like,
absolutely,
it's fair to say some automakers believe that their customers will be tolerant to a slight,
absolutely,
and some may think, no, we're not going to do that.
I think it's going to vary across automakers. I think it's going to vary across segments, models. I think maybe even down to regional areas, because again, you're going to get impacted by what the dealer is seeing in the market level conditions. Because MSRP is one way the price changes, right? Another way the price changes is list price, what gets put out to the consumer.
How much is that also related to the breakdown within each specific vehicle of which percentage of components are sourced or made in the U.S. versus anywhere else? And I asked, having Cadillac yesterday, and that's obviously an American brand, and they're not really able to answer right now what percentage of
they don't put that on the Monroney because
on the Monroney, what it shows you, so the Monroney typically will show you assembly. Remember, for Monroney purposes, according to NHTSA, U.S. and Canada are combined, even though we know the tariff situation is Canada, Mexico, right? Well, not all of North America, right? Because Mexico is not. So it's when it says it's U.S., you'll see U.S./Canada. So it throws those two into the bubble together, even though we know tariffs is actually being addressed as Canada, Mexico, U.S. So that's a little bit interesting and difficult for people to parse through the data. Second of all, it will matter based on, so there's three ways basically, at least that we can see that the tariffs are going to get put onto the vehicles. One, you completely import the assembled vehicle, you pay the full bear of the tariff from any other country outside of North America. If you import from Canada and Mexico, you get hit with the 25%, but they'll give you credit for U.S. content. And we don't yet know how they're going to certify which pieces really consist of U.S. content. And then the third way that they're going to tariff you is if you're U.S. assembled, but any componentry, parts, steel and aluminum, anything else that's coming into the country that's helping you build that vehicle, that will have been tariffed on its way into assembly. Does that make sense?
Yes, but it's worse than that. According to Bloomberg, for example, an Audi Q5 assembled in Mexico gets hit with a 25% tariff for being a car coming in from outside the U.S.
Yep.
Also a 25% tariff for being a non-USMCA compliant Mexican product coming from Mexico, and a 2.5% surcharge for not being USMCA compliant, if that makes sense. So total tariffs for the Audi Q5 coming in from wherever, San Luis Obispo, is going to be 52.5%.
Yes, so you're correct. The auto tariffs, and I haven't looked specifically into that car, but you're correct in the stacking. So when March 26th came up, Trump indicated, hey, these auto tariffs are going to be stacked on top of existing tariffs that have already been put into place, which included the February 1st IEEPA authorization of 25% on Canada and Mexico and the 10% on China, which the 10% went to 20%. And at the time, they gave the USMCA compliant exemption. So if a car is not USMCA compliant, you're correct. They were subjected to that 25% under the IEEPA order February 1st. And that would get stacked on top of the 25% that was then issued on March 26th. You're correct on that.
And by the way, Erin,
that is our understanding.
And do they have to? So I'm driving a BMW M2 right now, test driving it, and it's amazing.
Not currently.
No.
But you have that in
yes,
your car.
I'm not actually. Yeah, but so I have it, and
the wind in his hair.
Yeah, my hair is flying in the wind. No, so on the Monroney, it says parts content information, and then it lists major source of foreign parts, Germany 27%, Mexico 15%, assembled in Mexico, and then U.S., Canada parts content 6%.
Yes, you're right. And the Monroney label, so yes, I started to say there, and then I jumped to another fact. The Monroney label does, yes, it will typically tell you where the engine or transmission is from, what the other percentage of content is, and then what's available in the U.S. and then where it was assembled. I have seen varying, so admittedly, I haven't dug too deep into what does every manufacturer have to put on their Monroney label, but most of them do have those 4 or 5 different outlines,
Exactly.
which is helpful for consumers.
This engine was put together in Austria. The transmission
Right.
was built in Germany.
Right.
The whole thing prices out at $82,500, which is already kind of steep for an M2 if you think about it. Like when you were a kid, that would have been an M3, and it would have been like 45, like max.
Yeah.
So and now if they're not USMCA compliant, this M2 is going to sell in the U.S., assuming BMW doesn't eat the costs, for at least $130,000.
Right.
That's nuts.
In theory, well, it would cost the manufacturer that much. Yes.
Yeah.
So correct. Whether they end up, fully giving that to the client, and we know BMW has already said, "Hey, we're gonna eat the cost for now." I think through the end of May, is it? And that likely is an exercise of the automaker to say, what does this look like moving forward? Where do we put the costs? How do we afford this so that we don't make the M2 completely irrelevant? Or do we get rid of the M2? Because you know what, no matter which way we slice this, we're not going to be able to make this at an affordable price, and therefore we're going to get rid of the model. I mean, that's certainly possible as well. I know.
Matt, have you had anyone call and ask to buy your M2? Because I'm thinking the idea that dealerships are calling people saying, can we buy back?
Well, this is something else that I wanted to ask about. And Cox has been doing awesome coverage of the Mannheim. Well, I think you own the Mannheim auctions.
Yes, we do. Yep.
Yeah. But I have heard that we're already seeing like nutso prices at these auctions. Have you heard any, anecdotal evidence that dealers are paying high prices?
Sure. Yeah, no, we've been seeing increased sales conversion. Jeremy Robb, one of my colleagues, did his monthly movie call on Monday with some great, figures around what we're seeing in the used car market. But absolutely, we're starting to see the sales conversion rate go up. We're starting to see the wholesale costs go up, and we're starting to see listing prices go up. So 100%, you can tell that dealers are saying, we got to stock up and make sure that we have good supply of new and used.
So I wonder if we'll be back in the situation when I bought my Silverado in 2022. I went to the Chevy dealer to collect the truck when it was finally delivered from Mexico, where it was assembled. And they had an identical truck on the lot that was used with like 10,000 miles for $10,000 more than I was paying MSRP. Are we going to start seeing that again?
We might. I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of the same things that we thought about as par for the course during COVID. The difference is going to be that we're probably going to be in a period of high frenzy, high froth. But at the end of the day, we have a very different economic situation now for the country as a whole than we did in the pandemic, which I think is going to slowly but surely towards the end of the year tamper demand. We don't have the federal stimulus coming into the economy. We know that consumers are not as financially stable as they were then. We know that used to be when, interest rates were at crazy lows, and now they're at crazy highs, so on and so forth. People aren't moving as much, which usually when someone moves, it spurs on a purchase of a vehicle. So there's so many other things that are happening in the market that lead us to believe that while demand might froth quite a bit right now, it will likely taper off as we get further into the year because of all the other extenuating circumstances.
Are you following at all the sort of ongoing confusion when it comes to vintage vehicles and cars that are older than 25 years? It seemed like they were going to get hit, and then now there's a carve out, but they're still going to get hit by the parts tariffs. Do you have any clarity on that to share?
That's a great question, and I listened to you guys talking about this the other day, so I love it. Yeah, and I had just read. Yes. So as much as I have tried to steep my interest here in tariff and grow my knowledge, I have yet to officially become a trade lawyer. But I play one on TV, and I can tell you that it is confusing. Lo and behold, we're going to have a whole new, well, not new services industry, but let me tell you, customs brokers, it's your day. Get out there. Go for it, man. But I do think there is some confusion because there did seem to be an exemption for vehicles that were over 25 years. But then depending on what comes, what specificity there is in the Annex 1 and what actually hits the Federal Register, these are all things we never knew we would know anything about. That will tell us a little bit more information about which parts in specific will get hit with tariffs at what level. So will they get hit by the automotive tariffs? This is March of 26th. If they don't appear in that schedule, then they get hit by the 10% tariff that was put on all countries, and eventually by the reciprocal tariff. It's anyone's guess at this point. So this is why you see a lot of analysis, paralysis analysis.
It seems impossible. Because Hannah, if you already don't know the origin of the components of a new Cadillac, try figuring out the origin of the components of a 1997 635 CSI.
Right.
Well, that's my question is this deliberately confusing and chaotic, or is it a question of no one actually knows what they're doing? And I mean, is this completely deliberate? Or is this a case of the people in charge making the rules are sort of learning as they go and figuring out as they go along?
It's a great question. And what I would actually say, and I think you guys would agree with this, it is the massive uncovering of why we love automotive, right? But why, industry specific information is incredibly important when you're thinking about doing blanket moves that might impact multiple sectors. And the global automotive industry literally touches nearly every sector of the economy. It is incredibly and highly complex. And I don't believe it's as deliberate as some people might think it is, although there could be some deliberate components of it. I think it truly is. Even people in automotive who've been in it for 35 years are going, actually, where does that come from? Or how did that get into our supply chain? So I think by its very nature, it's incredibly complex, which is why, the more individuals that are out there that have been doing this for a long time and have that deep, deep knowledge of the supply chain are going to come in real handy to trying to dig this apart and figure out, wait a minute, because you need a trade lawyer, you need a customs broker, you need a supply chain expert. You're going to need several people at the table to mince through all of the details, because you're likely to cross over a couple of different areas of expertise to make a final declaration of yes, this part is subject to 16.5% effective tariff rate, right? I think it's going to take a lot of people to get there.
Yeah. Okay, good. Noted.
I have, I know you got to go, but I have one last question.
Yeah.
You don't just do the business end of this, you also love cars. And I know last time we talked to you, you were on a press junket. So I was going to ask, what's your favorite car of the currently assembled in the U.S. vehicles? Like if you had to pick one that's not assembled outside of this border, what would you choose? And it's not like there's a broad variety to choose from, right? Because they're mostly trucks.
Yeah, exactly. 50% of the chicken tax. That's something we should all consider in looking at this right now. Oh my goodness, you asked a tough one because I've been so focused on what's imported. I don't know that I've been paying a ton of attention to exactly what's actually built in the U.S.
I mean, do you like the Rivian?
I can give you
do you like the Lucid?
So you were going EV, huh?
No. I wouldn't choose an EV. I would probably choose an F-150 also, or a Tahoe. I like the Tahoes and Suburbans,
I mean, Honda and Toyota both, they both have a ton of vehicles. I mean, 80% of Toyotas are assembled in the U.S. Same thing with Honda.
There's Mustangs and Corvettes,
Right, there's Mustangs and Corvettes. I mean, I could list you 50 cars that are not assembled in the U.S. right now. You put me on the spot.
Well, a Mustang is one of the only V8s the V8s you can get with a stick can be listed on two fingers, right? A Ford Mustang GT and Cadillac CT5V Blackwing.
Right.
And that'd probably be my choice.
Yeah, I'll go with your choice. I'll let you I'll let you pick it out for me. How about that?
Thanks, Erin.
I trust your judgment.
Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Erin. Well, we all know my answer to that. There's only one answer, and that's the Corvette.
You know what? I might agree. I have this internal dilemma or this internal debate all the time. If I were going to choose a sports car, or would I choose a Cadillac CT5V Blackwing, or would I choose a Corvette? And there you could have also a Z06 or a ZL1. I don't know.
Talking specifically American branded vehicles.
I mean, if I had another 130, 40, 50 grand to buy a sweet car, those two would be way up there on my short list. way up there. And I don't know which one I would rather have. You know, they're different for, you can't get a stick with the Corvette, but do I care that much about 3 pedals? Maybe not.
No, I mean, I guess.
Because the Cadillac is horrible to look at. It's very ugly.
I know, but you could fit your kids in the back.
And it has a supercharger. You know, you can't get a new Corvette with a supercharger. The real
question is, what is more important to you, the engine or the transmission setup? This is, we could have a whole show on the Corvette versus the Cadillac CT. Everyone email us with what you think is more important, I think, right?
Yeah, that would be a great email. Our email is hotpursuit@bloomberg.net. Isn't that right?
Yeah, hotpursuit@bloomberg.net. I honestly would like to hear what is more important to the born and bred automotive file.
I wonder who else has this internal debate. Probably a lot of people, because those are 2 kind of halo vehicles, right?
Right.
One of them looks really cool and has an amazing and complex interior, maybe not the best sort of reputation. The other one looks awful, but is just mind-blowing in terms of the powertrain, has a stick shift option, and a very elegant, I think, interior.
You know, I think about this a lot when it comes to houses in a way. Like, would you rather live in a house that looks very nondescript on the outside, but is really cool on the inside, or something that looks really beautiful on the outside, but is not especially charming on the inside?
Definitely the former.
Really?
Yeah, you know, when I started, I started going a lot to southern Spain, and because my wife is Spanish, I do that now a lot. I noticed there's this style, especially like in Sevilla, Cordoba, Granada, and I think it's from the Moors when they, ruled Spain for hundreds of years, and they have this thing where on the outside they don't want to show their wealth, so it just looks like, a stucco building, a wall. And then you go in and these gardens are beautiful and the interiors are amazing and there's like water fountains. And yes, I would rather have that for sure.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm really with you on that. And because when you're inside, that's your space. You're inhabiting that. I mean, yeah. Appearance is in the end.
I need to make a quick correction. Speaking of email, before we get flooded with, I said 1997 635 CSI and the E24 6 Series. They stopped making it in 1989. So,
okay, if anyone would have called you out on that, I would have. I don't know the difference. I would have been very surprised.
I've been talking with some car blogger bros a lot lately.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things that they key in on instantaneously, I will never,
honestly, those guys are the best fact checkers because you get nothing past them. I will never be able to get anything past that type of reader, which is a good thing,
Yeah, for sure. If I ever had written 1997 635 CSI on opposite lock, I would have been lambasted,
as a fool for such a careless error.
What a great car, though, the E24 6 Series. Such a
I was with Cadillac this week for their Celestiq. The Celestiq.
Ah, cool. All right, so
we should talk about that because Cadillac is on the brain this week.
Let's do it. And you also have driven the Escalade IQ.
Yes, and that review is going live on Monday. It'll be in Business Week magazine in the print issue, and it will be online on Monday after this episode goes live. So yeah, we should talk Cadillac. And I drove the Celestiq yesterday all day, all around LA, up in the mountains, in Hollywood and downtown. So
wait, is this the like $300,000? What's the story with the Celestiq? Because it has got a polarizing design, which I applaud.
Quite polarizing, and I might have figured it out. So this is the $360,000 all-electric vehicle. That it's a 2+2 car. The wheelbase is as long as an Escalade wheelbase. And it is as tall as the CT5. So it's the same height as a sedan, but its wheelbase is as long as an Escalade. It has a hatchback rear. And Cadillac is not marketing this as a wagon, but I think with the rear end is problematic. It's difficult to digest. And I really think their launch color of bright orange, like a McLaren style orange, has really, really hurt that car because it's not flattering to the car at all.
It doesn't look good in orange.
I did have the opportunity to see the car in multiple different colors this week. And I also started sort of framing the car as a wagon. And that helps me to understand the car better. That car in like sort of a smoky brown metallic is actually rather beautiful. And I started imagining it sort of like the Lamborghini Espada from the 70s or a Citroen SM, or even a Porsche 928. And when you start talking about it in those terms, I can kind of see it. I can see it. And I don't think any of those cars was particularly critically or popularly acclaimed when they debuted. But of course, now as vintage models, we really love them. So yeah, Cadillac is swinging for the fences, as it were, with this one. They have been working on this for 15 years with a lot of concepts ahead. Like if you remember the Escala, the Cadillac, I think it was the
But not
Escala.
always as an electric, right? Because that's where you
Not
lose
only
me
does it- they
when you
had it as
say
a hybrid.
Yeah.
Yes. So the last 5 years, they committed, they committed to making this an electric vehicle 5 years ago when it looked like everyone was going to be electric by 2025. Obviously, that hasn't happened. And I did ask multiple of the engineers yesterday, could you have pivoted 2 years ago when everyone kind of realized hybrids are important and they might be here to stay for quite a while? Could you have pivoted to hybrid? And they all said yes. But we wanted to stick with the plan and stay the course and, make a very audacious move. So this is their audacious move. Matt, tell me your thoughts. I can see you looking. I can see you sort of studying this car. I'm dying to know what you think.
So I'm not a fan of French cars, and I think the comparison to a Citroën is pretty spot on. Yeah, for sure. I like it much better when I think of a 928. So I think that's a really interesting way to frame it. I do applaud any car maker that is willing to take such a bold step. And it doesn't matter if I like it or not. For example, I think the Tesla Cybertruck is horrendous, but I think it's so cool that they actually made that. That was before, Elon lost his mind.
Politics aside.
But
yes.
But for me, like, $360,000, when you say that and then you follow it with all electric, I'm like tuning out because I don't care anymore,
I know. I know.
You were talking with Erin about retailers that go away from technology, right? Or your take I like on luxury, which is that things have to be real, wood, leather, and I need to smell, the gas. Like, I know that an electric powertrain is also real, but there's something to me about the mechanical moving parts of an internal combustion engine and the way it operates, probably because of my, my age and my history, but a lot of us have that. I can't think about luxury and electric in the same breath. I could be wrong. I've never driven like the Rolls-Royce Spectre, and you have. So, and I understand why that would be perfect for that magic carpet ride, like effortless motivation.
Totally.
And so my whole thinking on this could be changed when I drive one of these things, but I haven't yet. So
I bet you'll have that opportunity. I think Cadillac has had that car out and about, and they're going to have it more out now. I totally agree. Cadillac is going to make 25 of these in the first year. They've told me they've sold 22 of that 25. So they're not mass producing them. I'm sure this is a loss leader. And it's about trying to recapture some of what Cadillac used to mean. And we did talk a lot about how to tap into, Cadillac used to be the standard of the world, as their tagline was. It was the world standard for luxury. at one time. And I do think it's very fascinating that now we're being forced to consider, what does American luxury mean when we're thinking about tariffs affecting a lot of our other wonderful luxury items that are being imported. To your point about the electric vehicle, I agree. I don't think it's wrong that Rolls-Royce made an electric powertrain for the Spectre. That does go, and Rolls-Royce had already talked about making electric vehicles 100 years ago. So that seems very, in a way, authentic. Cadillac, it's a little bit different. I can tell you, I'm undecided. I know it's a really bad time to be selling a really expensive EV. Nobody wants them. I don't necessarily think it was wrong they did it. I can't talk more about it because I'm under embargo, but I don't.
I'm sure that it drives amazingly well, and I have driven. By the way, I was talking to some listeners recently who reiterated the idea that I'm anti-EV, which isn't true. I've driven electric vehicles that I found to be rewarding and luxurious. I really enjoy the Audi e-tron, for example. I really enjoy the Mercedes EQS, and it's super luxurious, right? And I think the electric powertrain fits. I love the electric BMW 7 Series, the i7. That's a very luxurious car, and it's very expensive, and I think it's probably to some extent worth it. But
I agree.
And I'm sure that the Cadillac Escalade IQ is going to be my favorite electric vehicle of all time, because I love the pickup trucks, the electric pickup trucks like the Sierra EV, and I love the GMC Hummer. I feel like Cadillac IQ is the perfect vehicle for that, because it's not as doesn't have the silly image as much as the Hummer does, and it doesn't. Totally. I won't feel like I'm overpaying, which I would with like an e-tron or
else. Yeah.
200 kilowatt hour battery does a lot to win my money, but sure. I don't know. For me, if it's really luxury, like $400,000, then I want to.
A big selling point to this vehicle, and really what they're leveraging, is the fact that each one will be made tailored to the customer specifications. There's no standard entry-level Celestiq. Each one is a made-to-order thing that you will pick the colors. It's not extensive bespoking, but it's pretty good, So if you already owned a Rolls-Royce and a Bentley and an Aston Martin, and you thought, oh, it'll be really fun to have an American vehicle that I can tell a story with the colors and the trims and all of that, it's a bit of a high price point vehicle, but yeah, I mean, they don't have to sell that many of them. I had dinner with Michael Simcoe, who's the head designer, the other night, and he still believes that electric vehicles are the future, even though nobody wants to buy them now.
I'm sure he's not wrong.
He really doubled down and said, hey, eventually this is where we're going, no question about it. So we're staying the course.
For sure, it's true. As a utility, as an appliance, it makes total sense. But that's not what this is supposed to be, right? Mm-hmm. No. In any case, I think a lot of it has to do with my own biases. I'm still confounded by the effect these tariffs are going to have on the ultimate driving machine, on the 911, on Ducati motorcycles. Like, what's going to happen? I look at this, when I saw this Monroney, it really, really drove it home for me. And for those who don't know, car makers put out these labels that are, I think, regulated by NHTSA. And they have to include certain pieces of information like vehicle content. So again, the M2, it says U.S. Canadian parts content 6%, Major source of foreign parts, Germany 27%, Mexico 15%. Final vehicle assembly, San Luis Potosi, Mexico. Engine, Austria. Transmission, Germany. This car is not getting sold in the U.S. without massive tariffs. And I think, BMW obviously produces so much here. And I think BMW is one of the biggest exporters in America. They export double-digit billions of dollars worth of products. But those are all X series, so that's X3, X5, X7. The M2 or any 2 series, 3 series, which ironically is what they started producing here in the U.S. in the 70s, but none of that's made here. So what are they going to do? And I think of my beloved Ducati motorcycles. They're already pretty pricey. I can put together a multistrada on the configurator and get well into $30,000. And if it's going to be tariffed at 25%, which I'm not positive about, I don't know how motorcycles will be handled, but it's all of a sudden it's going to cost closer to 40, right? So
yes. Yeah, do you think that now, it would seem natural that now a car like a BMW would be even more of a status symbol. 5 years from now, if these tariffs stick and, everything continues down this path, 5 or 10 years from now, hypothetically, those cars will be considered extremely like signifiers of status.
Yeah, but you can't, the
those.
point of the 3 Series is for,
I know.
someone who's just made it to middle management, or a young person who's just started on Wall Street, or someone who saved money and cares about driving. Like, I imagine that BMW, if this tariff sticks, I imagine they'll have to assemble them at Spartanburg again. And for a company like, I don't know, Ducati is Italian, is in its DNA, right? So they'll never be able to make a Panigale here. But I imagine they might at least consider, for the dirt bikes, they're making off-road vehicles now, to assemble those somewhere in the U.S.,
Are you getting a sense, just with the people that you're talking about, that some of the people who may have voted for Trump because they thought that it would help their bank accounts are now extremely frustrated and disappointed? Besides anyone in the headlines, just normal people, that they kind of thought, maybe I'll vote for him because it's going to do this and this and this for my portfolio or my business. But now it's like,
especially the latter. Especially the latter. I hear from so many people. We get a ton of small business owners writing in when I do my TV show every morning, saying there's no way for me to move my supply chain around. Basically, I'm not. Even for Apple, it'll be impossible. But for these big companies, they can at least pretend to move the supply chain or make multi-billion-dollar commitments to the Trump administration that will last as long as he does in office, and then keep making everything in China. But these smaller businesses, they can't do those things. So I got an email this week from someone who makes light fixtures in the Southwest. She designs them herself. She has a brick and mortar storefront. She employs Americans, but when they're made, they're put together, they're assembled in Asia. I got a message from a guy who runs a chocolate confectioner in New Jersey, and they make the product in New Jersey, but the ingredients come from Canada and Mexico, so they can't get around those 25% tariffs. And these are people who voted for Donald Trump because they agreed that maybe cars should be built in the U.S., but didn't expect it to hit their own businesses' bottom lines. Right. And now they can't hire employees. Maybe they have to let some go. They can't reinvest. But for the car makers, it's just an absolute nightmare. I mean, if you're GM or Ford, I guess you can move some production, but you're not going to build a new plant. That takes like minimum 3 or 4 years, probably 5 to 7. And by the time you have done that, someone completely different is in office. Needs stability and to do long-term planning.
completely, talking with the folks at Cadillac again this week, their big thing is we just want a target that doesn't move, whatever it is. So we just need something that isn't going to change, that we're worried about being kicked down the road a bit or whatever, because then we can plan for it. But at the moment, it's impossible to make any plans because everything is so volatile. So Cadillac is, even with regulations, emission standards, all that, I think if they know the target, they will do their best to hit it. They'll make it work. They just need to know that it's going to remain stationary.
Yeah, I think they're probably not going to get a lot of stability in this with this administration. And that's not a value judgment. I don't think that's what the Trump administration is aiming for. Stability is not the name of the game for them.
No.
I also think, I appreciate products made in the U.S. I guess we've talked about this before. I will spend extra money to buy something made in America, but if it's at these levels, right, at $60,000, $70,000, $80,000, if you're talking about raising those prices 10 or 20%, I'm just out of the game. I can't afford to, especially since I have to buy 2 cars, right, for my family. And
speaking of, can I ask how your motorcycle viewing went last weekend? Do you want to give us the Harley? You went to look at a Harley.
No. I'm doing that this weekend. I'm going to Danbury on Saturday to ride a Road King and a Fat Bob. But this last week I've been riding this Buell Super Cruiser, and I don't think I've ridden something that's as unique and exciting and cool in the motorcycle space for years.
Wow.
For years.
That's quite a statement.
I don't know if people say it's vaporware, like they don't think it's ever going to really come to market. But this week on my show, this coming week on Wednesday, I'm going to interview the CEO, Bill Melvin, who bought the manufacturer, bought the patents, bought the name from Eric Buell. And he claims to have taken in over 6,000 pre-orders for this Buell Super Cruiser. And that's, people put down $1,000 a piece for a pre-order, and that they're going to start making them in the fall. I'm very likely to put down my own deposit.
No way.
And I kind of hope that I won't get it until late in 2026 when I can afford to buy it. But that's the one thing that concerns me is the price. It's pretty high, $26,000. I think it's even $26,999. So $27,000 for a motorcycle that is just a V-twin in a tubular frame with a Buell swing arm.
Where does that price come from? How do they arrive at that figure?
I don't know. That's a good question. I will ask Bill when I have him on.
Ask him.
The show on Wednesday.
And speaking of, I'm driving this Lotus Electre SUV this week, and it's interesting. It's an electric SUV. The pricing starts at $230,000, and that seems insane.
That's a lot.
For a Lotus. Truly insane. And I'm going to ask them as I start writing the review, which I haven't yet, but can you walk me through how you arrive at this price point? And automakers hate to do that because that's, their proprietary business advantage information. But I clearly I'm not understanding and not seeing where that price comes from in the vehicle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'd be curious to hear the Buell folks.
I mean, for them, they're starting up, right? So this is a design that Roland Sands did for them. I'm sure he doesn't come cheap. And
I didn't know Roland Sands did that.
Yeah, he designed it, and they're building it, in-house in Detroit. So they have to put up a factory, staff it, get the parts, and they're mostly American sourced parts. So I can't remember the number now, but it's over 60% of the components are going to be American.
Well, they were claiming they're the most American.
They do claim they're the most American made brand. I don't know. I haven't asked Harley Davidson about the claim that there was an engineer at Buell who told me that Harley gets 30 to 40% of their parts are American sourced. That sounds low. Right. And by the way, Harley's CEO, Jochen Seitz, who has been the source of a lot of problems, I would think, for the brand, is stepping down. So he's done.
Just heard about that.
Yeah.
Are you surprised? Do you think that's actually
I'm
a
not
good
at
thing?
all surprised because, I mean, look at the stock chart. It just goes from the upper left-hand corner to the lower right-hand corner, down, down, down. I think one of the board members this week actually quit because he wanted Seitz to leave immediately, and Seitz is staying on until they find a successor.
So we don't know who's coming next.
We don't know who's coming next, but I think at Harley-Davidson, they had the same problem as most motorcycle makers, and also that Buell's going to face, which is that they just don't sell products that are affordable or accessible to the kind of people that start riding bikes. Who rides bikes? Like, you start when you're a teen, right? Nobody picks it up in his 40s. So, and you can't afford to pay $27,000 for a road glide when you're, a 17-year-old, or when you're, 21, working on the factory floor. Like, you need to buy something that costs multiple $1,000s, and only Royal Enfield is really doing that right now. Or maybe
even the scrambler Ducatis are expensive, and those are, accessible.
Supposed to
I
be,
think.
yeah.
To a younger rider, or a smaller rider, or a newer rider, or any of the above.
Yeah.
But,
so I mean, I think the CEO previous to Seitz, Matt Levidich, was pushing like a more inexpensive kind of mobility oriented product, and Seitz came in and was like, no, we're doing like the big expensive stuff, or relatively expensive stuff, and also we're going to do like major DEI and ESG, which doesn't gel with like the Harley faithful, right? And we're going to start producing stuff like in India. That's not what the Harley Davidson forum likes to hear. So
that's too bad. I mean, that does seem to be a fundamental problem, that any company would be known for being not diverse.
It's not, I don't know if it's about not diverse, but it's about...
I'm putting that in a very polite way. I mean, to me, that's just kind of unforgivable.
I don't think that that's the case, though, because they are, I think, a very diverse crowd in terms of like ethnicity.
I'm not talking about reality. I'm talking about the perception, the reputation and the perception. Yes, we all have friends who are people of color who ride Harleys. I can list you off several, but that is not the brand reputation. The brand reputation is like, older white dudes. True.
But I think the problem wasn't that they were aiming for diversity in terms of their customer base. I think the problem was that probably we shouldn't even talk about this stuff on this podcast.
I can really dive into this.
Let's not.
Since we are not a political podcast.
In fact, let's wrap it up. Sebastian's let's wrap it up.
The producer's like, wrap.
Is there anything you got coming up next week?
You know what? Well, the Long Beach Grand Prix is this weekend. So that's big for car lovers in LA. I actually think I'm going to a British car show on Saturday, which is out sort of toward the valley, and it's just old British cars. It's sleepy. It's very cool. It's not about influencers or content. It's just a bunch of old Rolls-Royce owners.
Well, I'm glad, but there is diversity in that because they're foreign, right?
Sure. What about you?
What
do you do?
Well, like I said, I'm going to go ride these Harley Davidsons with Al at the Danbury, Connecticut dealership. And I'm going to be ringing out this M2 on the way up and the way back.
Cool. That's such a fun car.
I mean, it's so much fun. It's just
classic.
It is classic, crazy fun. I still think the price is a little high, $82,500. That's before tax. So, out the door, it's like $90,000 for an M2. To me, that's a little bit crazy, but I guess this is the cheapest you'll get it.
Yeah, I know, right?
So, yeah, I'm looking forward to talking to you again next week at the same time, same place.
And you know what? I'm going to be in New York next week.
Oh, a different place. Cool.
I will see you live and in living color.
Right on.
Can't wait.
All right. I'll introduce you to Bill Melvin while you're here as well.
Wonderful.
I'm Matt Miller.
I'm Hannah Elliott, and this is Bloomberg.